And so we're talking about a very complex initiatives across an organization, right? So what are the most important things to get right in change management?
One of the key things really is to be sure you have the appropriate leadership who are acting as your sponsors. I know that for many leaders, their time is also very compressed. But having a good set of sponsors for anything you're trying to digitally transform so that you can make sure that you are actually helping affect the change, both from the top down as well as from the bottom up. So you really need to have both of those things going. So that's very, very important to make sure that you have happening.
And so what kind of things start to fall within change management now? What are some of the thinking, some of the processes, some of the considerations that companies should be thinking about when it comes to change management or to organizational change management?
Well, there are a lot of different frameworks that are in place, and those frameworks are really great for getting people to kind of get on the same page and understand what change management is and a process behind doing it. What we've really tried to do, and with all of our clients, is understand how they think of change management and bring our experience to the table about how to do change management and what it is, and create actually a solution for them about how to do organizational change management. And typically, it's really, in some ways, pretty simple, right? You really have to understand what's changing, right? Who's impacted, to what degree they're impacted. And based on those things, you get to figure out what are all the activities like communications or training. When should we check on whether or not they're ready to make those changes? When should we check on whether or not they've adopted those changes? Those types of things are really the path for doing all of the activities around change management itself.
How many initiatives should an enterprise be considering at any one time, considering the challenges with all of the people management side of things?
That is really an interesting question, and one that I don't have a definitive answer for with a number. But one of the things that I just mentioned to you was, what is the level of the change impact? So we try to do two things in the process of organizational change with our clients. One is very upfront at the beginning of their sort of, if you will, their portfolio process, when they're trying to make all the decisions about what it is they're going to do for a quarter or a year, that they evaluate the magnitude of that change. And so with a very simple set of questions to understand across people, process, technology, and data, what is this bigger than a bread box, right? And then basically, as they get all of these measures down, they can start to see a landscape of how many projects they have that are actually falling into what we would call the high complexity, right? High impact. If you think about it as a quadrant, that upper right-hand quadrant versus, a different level of complexity and a different level of change impact across all the stakeholder groups. And at that point, they can really start to make a decision about, are we trying to saturate too much of one group, right? Or one role at a time? Then you really start to look at it at a more detailed level over time. And basically, you probably have potentially heard the term a heat map, right? You sort of build out a heat map of all of the changes that are going to occur across all of the stakeholder groups and all of the roles. Traditionally, change management has happened in silos, right? It's happened at this project, and another project. And when you look across your portfolio, that view is very hard to obtain without some level of automation. So what we've really brought to the table with both our change as a service and our product Chama is the ability to actually capture that information, not just for a portfolio, but for many portfolios across the enterprise, so that you can actually, when we say break the silos, we're basically talking about flip the picture, which says, flip it to that people perspective, that stakeholder group and those roles across, if it's 20 projects or 25 projects, so you can see the level of saturation. And then it takes some level of understanding about what you're asking your employees to do on a day-to-day basis in any given period of time for what you're asking them to do to change.
So there is no one number. It depends on the scope of the project. It depends on the portfolio strategy. Is that right?
Yes. And it's always moving. So
it is always moving. I mean, and I'm sure that anyone who is in an enterprise that is listening, they understand that, especially since 2020, I think that that things are moving even faster. But you mentioned 4 things: people, processes, technology, and data. Are they the 4 components of change management?
They're 4 components of any digital transformation or solution you're trying to deliver, right?
And the people part is the change management part, and the processes, the data, and the technology are kind of separate components. Is that right?
Well, they're separate components, but they're also, you also have to understand those components to know how they're impacting the people. The other piece that's there that you typically might assess is also included in some of those questions are around culture, right? Because if you're trying to change culture, that is a very specific thing to try to go change and take some very focused effort to go do. As well as whether or not policies are changing. So policies and culture are wrapped in some of the people, if you will, type question.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense then, right? And so we're talking about a very complex initiatives across an organization, right? What are the most important things to get right in change management?
One of the key things really is to be sure you have the appropriate leadership who are acting as your sponsors. I know that for many leaders, their time is also very compressed, but having a good set of sponsors for anything you're trying to digitally transform so that you can make sure that you are actually helping affect the change, both from the top down as well as from the bottom up. So you really need to have both of those things going. So that's very, very important to make sure that you have happening. And I think the other is basically what we've been talking about. Don't forget about the people, because a lot of times there's change management happens in what we call the last mile, which means they sort of wait until they get into testing and the solution's almost built, and they go, okay, we need communications and we need training, right? So don't wait till the last mile to make a decision about, we need to pay attention to the people. It's really more effective if you help them prepare over time. Which includes getting them aware and kind of moving through what we like to refer to as the change curve. And that curve has many definitions, but it really starts out, with the way people, even if you think about the way you have changes in your life, you kind of go through an emotional process, right? And a learning process about what those changes are.